Welcome to today's historical deep dive into a life so grand it redefined empires, and a fall so steep it etched itself into the very geography of defeat. We're talking about Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who bent Europe to his will, only to break against the stubbornness of frost and fate. Was he a visionary architect of a new world, or the ultimate gambler who didn't know when to fold? His story isn't just history. It's a mirror, reflecting the intoxicating allure and crushing cost of absolute ambition. If you love immersive, real storytelling about ambition and downfall, hit like and subscribe. It helps us more than you know. Drop a comment with your favorite Napoleon quote or the moment that shocked you most. Let's begin and change the way you think about history. You stand on the banks of the Berezina River in late November 1812. The wind bites like Cossack lances, a chilling preview of the enemies still lurking in the frozen wastes. It carries the groans of a dying army. This is not the Grand Army that marched east just months ago. 1,000,000 strong, resplendent in its confidence, shimmering like a metallic river across the plains. But a skeletal, frostbitten horde. Horses collapse, their breath steaming in the frigid air before they crumple into the snow. Men huddle around meager fires, earning furniture torn from abandoned villages. Their once proud uniforms mere rags, their faces gaunt masks of despair and hunger. The makeshift pontoons, hastily built under fire, are choked with panicked soldiers, desperate civilians, and the horrifying detritus of a shattered dream. Abandoned cannons, broken wagons, frozen corpses, artillery pieces, once the instruments of your glorious victories, the thunder that echoed from Italy to Austria, now lies submerged in the icy water or abandoned on the bank, too heavy to move, too precious to simply leave, yet left nonetheless. The air smells of defeat, of frozen flesh, of ambition's bitter, inescapable end. This isn't just a military retreat, a difficult strategic withdrawal. It is the raw, physical manifestation of a leader's most dangerous, perhaps fatal, flaw. The unshakable belief that will alone can conquer reality. You, Napoleon, who orchestrated the fates of nations like pieces on a chessboard, are now helpless against the twin, implacable forces of the Russian winter and a logistics chain stretched past its absolute breaking point. The Emperor of the French, the master of strategy, reduced to watching his empire melt away with the ice. This moment, this terrible crossing, reveals that even the most brilliant plan, the most audacious vision, crumbles without grounding in the brutally possible. It is a stark, freezing reminder that pushing past perceived limits requires first acknowledging them, understanding their strength. Here at the Berezina, you learn, or perhaps tragically, you refuse to truly learn, that nature and human endurance have a terrifying veto power over even the most iron will. Greatness without limits doesn't breed enduring empire. It breeds this. This chaos, this loss, this path leading inevitably towards exile. It's a chilling irony that the man who conquered kings is brought low by mud, snow, and the simple, unyielding fact of distance. The rough stone of Corsica is your first classroom, not in formal lessons, but in the wind that whips off the sea, the fierce pride of its people, and the constant, low hum of resistance against French rule. You are Napoleon Bonaparte, a son of this rugged island, but even here, in your homeland, you feel the sting of not quite belonging. Your family, minor gentry, grasps for status, a microcosm of the island's own struggle for significance. You internalize their anxieties. The sense of being overlooked, provincial. It breeds a simmering resentment, a desperate need to prove Corsica and yourself is worthy of the world's attention. Then comes the jarring transition to France, the supposed center of civilization. Brienne, the military school, is a world away from sun-baked hills and family warmth. Here, the alienation sharpens into a constant ache. Your thick Corsican accent is mocked. Your plain clothes stand out against the finery of French aristocrats. You are the outsider, the dark-skinned provincial, navigating a pale, privileged world. This isn't just discomfort, it's a crucible. Every sneer, every slight, hardens your resolve. You retreat into yourself, into the libraries devouring history. You walk with Alexander through Persia, plot with Caesar in Gaul, analyze the campaigns of Frederick the Great. These aren't just stories. They are blueprints, proofs of concept. Men, starting with far less, who bent the world to their will. A fire ignites within you, fierce and consuming. The world outside is chaotic. Revolution is brewing. Old orders are crumbling, and it feels vast, malleable, ripe for a hand strong enough to shape it. You feel a burning, relentless energy, a certainty born of this alienation and this reading. You are destined for more, much, much more. This isn't mere youthful fancy, it's the seed of an almost messianic self-belief. It is forged in the very feeling of not belonging, a refusal to accept the margins fate seems to have assigned you. The tragic irony is that the empire you would later build would erase much of the Corsican identity you first fought to defend. The profound insight here is that disadvantage isn't necessarily a barrier. It can be an extraordinary engine of will. This period teaches you, firsthand, that a refusal to accept the status quo, to be defined by others' limitations or perceptions, can generate unimaginable power. Your first lesson in leadership isn't learned on a drill field, but within yourself. The conviction that you will become the person history remembers, even if you have to invent him piece by piece, shedding the skin of the awkward outsider for the armor of destiny. Ask yourself, how much of the future emperor's relentless drive was simply the scarred kid proving them all wrong? You stand amidst the bitter coastal winds of 1793. Toulon, the crucial naval port, is a wound gaping open on France's side, occupied by royalists and buttressed by the formidable might of the British fleet under Admiral Hood. The air vibrates with the aimless energy of the Revolutionary Army, a chaotic mix of zealots and draftees, led by men more adept at political speeches than sieges. You are merely a young artillery officer, a Corsican, a voice easily lost in the din of indecision. But your eyes cut through the confusion like a surgeon's blade. While others debate troop movements and logistics, you see the simple, brutal truth: the harbor. Control the land overlooking it, and you control the ships within. The key isn't a frontal assault on the city, but seizing the heights, particularly Fort Mulgrave, nicknamed Little Gibraltar by the British. It's a bold, almost reckless idea, requiring focused artillery fire and a concentrated assault. You argue your case with a fervor that borders on insubordination. Generals, political commissars, they all receive the sharp edge of your conviction. You cajole, you demand, you override. Bureaucracy crumbles before the sheer force of your tactical logic and an undeniable, almost arrogant self-belief. You personally scout the positions, ignoring conventional wisdom about range and angle, placing batteries where they will inflict maximum damage on the anchored fleet. This isn't just military planning. It's a psychological operation, turning the enemy's perceived sanctuary into a death trap. You even rename one battery the Battery of the Men Without Fear, a direct challenge to hesitant troops. The cannons roar. Under your precise direction, round shot and shell rain down on the British vessels. The anchorage becomes untenable. Admiral Hood, faced with the destruction of his fleet, has no choice but to withdraw, taking with him the Royalist sympathizers in a panicked evacuation. Toulon is retaken, a stunning victory that echoes across the fractured republic. This is your baptism of fire, your explosive entrance onto the world stage. It teaches you the paramount value of decisive action in a crisis. While others drown in uncertainty, the leader who acts charts the course. It confirms your dawning realization that opportunity often lies hidden within chaos, invisible to those without clear strategic vision. And it solidifies a principle that will define your career. Fortune doesn't just favor the bold. It rewards the audacious when audacity is married to genuine talent and unwavering execution. You didn't just win a battle. You proved a philosophy. Ask yourself, when faced with overwhelming chaos, do you seek consensus or do you impose clarity? What would you have done, standing there amidst the confusion at Toulon, knowing your entire future rested on convincing men who outranked you to follow a plan they couldn't even see? October 1795. Paris, a city still trembling from the recent storm of revolution, now faces a new tempest. Royalist mobs, emboldened and desperate, spill onto the streets, a human tide threatening to drown the fragile authority of the National Convention. Chaos reigns, the air thick with fear and the scent of rebellion. You, a young, ambitious officer, find yourself thrust into the maelstrom. The Directory, paralyzed by indecision and facing annihilation, turns to you. The man known for crushing rebellion in Toulon. They give you command. You survey the scene. The mobs are vast. They believe numbers are on their side. You, however, have something they lack: cannons. Not just cannons, but the understanding of their true, devastating potential. The conventional wisdom dictates caution, perhaps warning shots over the heads of the crowd to disperse them. But you see the situation with crystal clarity, stripped of sentimentality. This is not a negotiation. It is a battle for survival, for control. Hesitation is a luxury the Republic cannot afford, a weakness you cannot afford. You order your artillerymen to load with grapeshot, canisters filled with hundreds of musket balls, turning each cannon into a colossal shotgun. Point-blank range, directly into the massed ranks surging down the streets towards the convention. The roar is deafening, a sound that tears through the historical narrative like a physical force. Grapeshot rips through flesh and bone, scything down hundreds in moments. The pavement runs red. The uprising, so confident moments before, shatters under the sheer, overwhelming force. Panic replaces fury. The mob disperses, broken and terrified. This brutal act, the infamous whiff of grapeshot, instantly solidifies your reputation. You are not just a military tactician. You are a man utterly ruthless when necessary. It is a chilling display of pragmatism. Power is not negotiated or appeased. It is maintained by force. Authority, once challenged, must respond not with warnings, but with overwhelming, undeniable power. This moment is a stark, bloody lesson in political physics, etched onto the streets of Paris. It reveals a deeper, perhaps darker, insight. Control requires a willingness to spill blood, to pay a heavy moral cost that others shrink from. This efficiency, this willingness to unleash hell when others falter, sets you apart. It secures your position, not just as a defender of the convention, but as a man capable of wielding ultimate power. It marks you as someone who understands the true nature of control in a revolutionary age. Ask yourself, standing there, facing the mob, the fate of the government hanging in the balance, knowing the horror grape shot would unleash, could you have given that order? What does it reveal about the path you are now forging? A path paved with such chilling calculation. You arrive in Italy in the spring of 1796, the air still carrying the chill of the Alps, but your mind already burning with the heat of conquest. You step before the army of Italy, a ragged collection of around 30,000 men, demoralized, unpaid, and ill-equipped. Across the river, waiting in the valleys and mountains, stands significantly larger Austrian and Sardinian armies, well-supplied and confident. This isn't just a military challenge. It's a test of pure will against overwhelming material reality. You don't give rousing speeches filled with abstract ideals. You offer something tangible, visceral, glory, honor, and yes, plunder. You march them not with boots heavy with dread, but with a lightning-fast pace that leaves the enemy bewildered. This isn't conventional warfare. It's a blur of movement, deception, and concentrated fury at critical points. You understand that speed isn't just a tactic, it's a psychological weapon, shattering the enemy's ability to react and bolstering your own men's belief in their invincibility. Your soldiers, seeing you sharing their hardships, earned you the nickname Le Petit Caporal, the Little Corporal, a surprisingly intimate moniker for a man driven by such monumental ambition. But it works. They believe in you because you appear to believe in them, and crucially, because you deliver. Victory follows victory in a dazzling cascade. Montenotte, Millesimo, Dago, Mondovi, swiftly knocking Sardinia out of the war. Then the Austrians fall one by one. Lodi, Castiglione, Arcola, Rivoli. Each battle isn't just a military triumph. It's a stroke on the canvas of your burgeoning legend. At the Bridge of Lodi, you personally rally troops under heavy fire, solidifying the Little Corporal image. At Arcola, you again expose yourself to extreme danger. You are not just directing from the rear, you are embodying the reckless courage you demand from your men. This era teaches you the intoxicating power of inspiring soldiers, not just through strategy, but through sheer, visible audacity. You dictate terms directly to the Austrians at Campo Formio, signing treaties that reshape Italy and defy the hesitant directives of the Directory back in Paris. They sent you to be a nuisance. You became a sovereign force. This is where the template is forged. Ruthless efficiency on the battlefield, coupled with audacious political maneuvering off it. The insight is stark and clear. A leader's unshakable conviction and relentless energy can be a more potent force than cannons or cavalry. It turns a disheartened mob into an engine of conquest. Ask yourself, was this the birth of military genius, or the terrifying revelation of how easily men can be manipulated by promises of glory and a leader who appears to walk among them, sharing their dust and blood. But triumphs in Italy prove the terrifying truth. Give men a leader who promises everything and delivers victory, and they will follow him anywhere, even to the ends of the earth. You sail east, a ghost fleet slipping across the Mediterranean under the cloak of midnight. Your target, not London directly, but the ancient sands of Egypt, the supposed artery of Britain's empire. This is your grand design, a strategic gamble born of ambition and a perceived naval weakness against your nemesis. You are Napoleon Bonaparte, and you believe you can strike Britain's heart through its richest distant possession. Landing is chaos on sun-baked shores, the air thick with dust and anticipation. You march inland, the Mamluks, fierce warriors steeped in centuries of tradition, are your first test. Before the looming, timeless shapes of the pyramids, you draw up your lines. The moment is epic, deliberate, theatrical. You turn to your soldiers, point to the colossal monuments, and deliver the words that will echo through history. Soldiers, you declare, your voice carrying across the ranks. From the height of these pyramids, 40 centuries look down upon you. It is pure, potent myth-making, forging a link between your nascent revolution and the grandeur of antiquity. The subsequent battle is a brutal, decisive victory. On land, your modern army sweeps aside the Mamluks' cavalry charges. Egypt, for a moment, feels within your grasp, but the sea is a fickle mistress, and Britain has a master waiting. While you conquer cities and delve into ancient tombs with your accompanying savants, a remarkable side note, turning military invasion into a scientific expedition, Admiral Horatio Nelson hunts your fleet. At the Battle of the Nile, he finds them anchored poorly in Abu Qir Bay. What follows is annihilation. Ship after ship is destroyed or captured. Your entire fleet is gone. Suddenly, you are not a conqueror opening a new front. You are a trapped general, your army isolated in a hostile land, cut off from France. The campaign transforms. It becomes a grueling march under a merciless sun, a struggle against disease and logistics, a desperate lunge into Syria that fails at the walls of Acre. The initial grand vision collides violently with the brutal realities of distance, supply, and, critically, naval dominance. Yet, even trapped, you are learning. You see the immense power of controlling the narrative. Despite the military disaster, the loss of thousands, and the ultimate failure to cripple Britain, you receive news of political instability back in France. The Directory is weak. Opportunity calls across the waves. In a move of breathtaking audacity, you slip through the British blockade with a few ships, abandoning your army, leaving your trusted General Kleber in command. It is a calculated risk, potentially viewed as desertion, but you understand that perception is paramount. You race back to Paris not as a defeated general fleeing a lost cause, but as a hero who dared to challenge the Orient, a leader needed to save the Republic from internal decay. Egypt was a military failure, a strategic dead end costing France dearly. But upon your return, it is spun into a triumph of exploration and valiant struggle. You presented yourself as the only man capable of bringing order from chaos. Ask yourself, was this calculated abandonment a stroke of genius political timing, or a cold betrayal of the men who fought for you? What would it take for you to abandon your forces to seize a different kind of power? Egypt teaches you that myth-making is not just a tool of leadership, It can become the foundation of it, shaping reality through sheer force of will and carefully crafted propaganda. You have learned that escaping a trap can be spun into a strategic withdrawal, and failure can be presented as a necessary hardship endured by a destined leader. Your path to supreme power now lies not on the sands of Egypt, but in the salons and streets of Paris. France, 1799. A ship adrift in a storm. The Directory, a council of 5, governs with a mix of corruption and incompetence, leaving the nation yearning for a strong hand to steer it. Stability is a whispered hope, chaos a constant threat. You, returned from Egypt, are that hope, a name synonymous with victory, a military hero worshipped by the people, and crucially, by the army. You see the fractured state, the power vacuum, the moment ripe for the taking. Political veterans, like Sieyès, plot to revise the Constitution, but they lack the muscle, the popularity, the audacity to seize power decisively. They turn to you. This isn't an invitation to serve. It's an opportunity presented on a silver platter of national despair. The plot is simple, yet fraught. Stage a parliamentary coup. Use the veneer of legality. Then apply force where persuasion fails. The 18th of Brumaire dawns. The Council of Ancients, more amenable to your influence, move sessions to St. Cloud, citing a fabricated Jacobin threat. You are given command of the troops in Paris, ostensibly to protect the councils. But the real target isn't Jacobins, it's the Directory itself. They resign or are coerced into doing so. The first hurdle cleared with relative ease. But the next day, the 19th, the scene shifts to the Council of 500. Here, resistance is fierce. Deputies loyal to the Republic, sensing the true nature of the plot, cry out against you. Down with the dictator! Outlaw him! The hall erupts. You step forward, attempting to address them, but the shouts drown you out. Men surge towards you, some grabbing, shoving. In that chaotic moment, you are physically attacked, scratched, perhaps even struck. The scene described later by loyalists paints a picture of peril, of assassination attempts. For a terrifying instant, the coup falters. You are jostled out of the hall, bruised and shaken, perhaps even disoriented. This is where the planned coup almost unravels, a testament to the unpredictable nature of power grabs. But you have loyalists, and, crucially, a quick-thinking brother, Napoleon Bonaparte, president of the 500 at that very moment. While you recover outside, Lucien, still in the hall, tries desperately to control the chaos. Failing that, he escapes and joins you. Outside, addressing the troops gathered there, Lucien performs a vital act of political theater. He dramatically draws a dagger, swearing to plunge it into his own brother's heart if Napoleon ever betrays the ideals of liberty. He claims the deputies inside are under the sway of assassins bought by England, threatening your life. This is a bold lie, but it galvanizes the soldiers. With your personal charisma briefly dimmed by the physical assault, Lucien's performance provides the critical spark. Soldiers, loyal to your name, are convinced their hero is in danger. Orders are given. Murat, leading the grenadiers, marches into the orangery where the 500 are meeting. With drums rolling and bayonets fixed, they clear the hall by force. Deputies scatter, leaping from windows, leaving their robes behind. The legislative branch is literally expelled by military might. The coup is complete. Later that evening, A rump session of compliant deputies is gathered to legitimize the proceedings, dissolving the directory and establishing the consulate. You are named first consul, effectively the head of state, granted vast powers. This isn't an election, it's a power grab, secured not by votes or constitutional process, but by seizing a moment of national weakness and backing it with bayonets. You have crossed a chilling Rubicon. You entered St. Cloud, a respected general, a servant of the fragile republic. You leave it, its master. The lesson etched into your mind is indelible. Political power, at the highest level, is not always granted. It must sometimes be taken, often with a brutal blend of cunning, timing, and force. The insight gained here is profound and dark. A prepared mind, ask yourself, standing on that threshold between general and ruler, bruised but triumphant, would you have hesitated? Or would you have embraced the power the same way? Section 8. Consolidating Power. Order from Chaos. You stand in the gilded halls of the Tuileries, not as a conquering general fresh from Italy or Egypt, but as the first consul. The air in Paris is thick with the dust of a decade of revolution, a whirlwind of ideals, guillotines, and ceaseless change that has left the nation fractured, bankrupt, and yearning for stability. The Directory collapsed like a rotten structure, leaving you to survey the wreckage. Your ambition, often painted only in the scarlet hues of battlefields, now turns inward towards the very foundations of France. This is not a campaign measured in leagues, but in laws, institutions, and the patient, often thankless, work of administration. The chaos isn't just theoretical, it cripples daily life. The treasury is empty, bandits roam the roads, and the myriad local authorities established by the revolution operate in isolation, often at cross purposes. Your first act is surgical. Centralization. Like gathering scattered pieces of a shattered clock, you draw power and responsibility back to Paris. Prefects and sub-prefects, appointed by you, are dispatched to every corner of France, acting as your eyes, hands, and voice. They report directly, bypassing regional squabbles, ensuring taxes are collected, conscripts are raised, and your decrees are implemented swiftly and uniformly. The effect is immediate, felt from the grandest ministry to the smallest village, a sense of order, a clear line of command that France hasn't known since before 1789. Cause: decades of administrative fragmentation and chaos. Effect: unprecedented governmental efficiency and direct control. Next, the economy. A nation cannot fight, cannot build, cannot thrive without a stable financial engine. In 1800, you establish the Bank of France. This isn't merely a state bank. It's a cornerstone of modern finance, designed to manage the national debt, issue currency, and provide credit, leveraging private capital under state supervision. It's a pragmatic stroke, blending revolutionary energy with old-world financial discipline, providing the stability needed to fund your future ambitions, both civil and military. But France's wounds aren't just administrative or economic. They are spiritual and social. The revolution brutally severed the link between the state and the Catholic Church, alienating a vast swathe of the population. Though personally ambivalent towards religion, seeing it more as a tool for social order than a path to salvation, you recognize the immense power of faith. The Concordat of 1801 is a masterful piece of political negotiation. You reach out to Pope Pius VII, restoring the Church's legal status in France, allowing bells to ring freely again, and bringing an end to the schism that tore communities apart. In return, the Pope accepts the loss of church lands seized during the Revolution and agrees that bishops will be nominated by the state, only receiving spiritual investiture from Rome. It's a calculated compromise. You placate traditionalists and heal a national wound, while ensuring the Church remains subordinate to the state, a useful prop rather than a rival power structure. It's an act of political genius, showing that you understood the heart of France wasn't just in its abstract ideals, but in its ancient traditions. Perhaps your most enduring creation in this period isn't a military victory or a treaty, but a book, the Civil Code. Begun in 1800 and promulgated in 1804, the Code Napoleon is a titanic legal achievement. It sweeps away the chaotic patchwork of feudal, Roman, and revolutionary laws that varied wildly from region to region, replacing it with a single, clear, logical system governing property, family, and individual rights. You personally preside over many of the Council of State's drafting sessions, often working late into the night, challenging lawyers, debating articles, demanding clarity and simplicity. It enshrines principles of meritocracy, property rights, and legal equality, though notably curtailing rights for women established in the early Revolution. This code isn't just a legal reform. It's the architecture of a modern state, exporting French legal concepts across Europe with your conquests. It is the ultimate expression of power as the ability to shape society's fundamental rules, proving that your ambition is not merely to command men, but to design the very framework within which they live. You surround yourself with talent, Laplace for science, Gaudin for finance, Portalis and Tronchet for law, Fouché for police. You demand results, not pedigree, fostering a meritocracy born of necessity and your own instincts. This period is one of relentless work, fueled by coffee and sheer willpower. You work 18-hour days, tackling everything from national budgets to the specifications for a new bridge. You are building France brick by brick, institution by institution. This era reveals a deeper truth about power and leadership. True power isn't just the thunder of cannons, it's the quiet, persistent act of creating order, building institutions, and shaping the laws that govern daily life. You are proving that visionary leadership can indeed rebuild a shattered nation, pulling it from the brink of anarchy. But ask yourself, in consolidating the nation's power, how much are you also consolidating your own? Is this administrative brilliance ultimately in service of France or of the man at its helm? This period of profound reform is also the forge where the emperor is being subtly, inevitably shaped. December 2nd, 1804. The air in Notre Dame Cathedral is thick with incense and the hushed anticipation of thousands. Gold gleams, silk rustles, power gathers. You, Napoleon Bonaparte, stand at the threshold of an ancient ritual, surrounded by the most powerful figures of your era. Marshals who bled for you, dignitaries who bowed to your will, representatives of a continent you are reshaping. And there, waiting, is Pope Pius VII, the very embodiment of centuries of divine authority, flown from Rome to bless this moment, to place the imperial crown upon your head. This act is meant to legitimize your reign in the eyes of God and tradition, to connect the dynamic power of the revolution, now distilled into your person, with the venerable lineage of European monarchies. But legitimacy for you is not granted. It is taken. Your path has been one of relentless self-creation. From the dusty, rebellious island of Corsica to the halls of Paris, from a junior officer ignored by his peers to a general feared by empires, you have seized every opportunity, molded every circumstance. You did not inherit your station. You earned it through sheer force of will, strategic brilliance, and a battlefield record stained with the blood of your enemies. To have the Pope crown you would be to imply that your power flows from a source external to yourself, beholden to the Church or traditional divine right. This is not your truth. The moment arrives. The crown, heavy with jewels and symbolism, is within reach. Pope Pius VII raises his hand, ready to perform the sacred rite. But you move first, with a gesture that is both deliberate and electrifying. You reach out, take the crown from the Pope's hands, and lift it yourself. The silence in the vast cathedral is absolute, broken only by the rustle of fabrics and the distant murmur of the crowds outside. You look at the crown, then directly ahead, perhaps seeing the long road you have traveled, perhaps seeing the empire you are forging. You place the crown upon your own head. Then you turn and place a similar diadem upon the head of your Empress, Josephine, completing the tableau of a dynasty born not of lineage, but of individual ascent. This single act is a thunderclap of assertion. It declares to France, to Europe, and to history that your power comes from you alone, from your intellect, your courage, your ambition, and the unwavering loyalty of your army. It is the ultimate statement of self-reliance, a breathtaking defiance of tradition, a public severing of the ties between secular power and religious sanction that had defined European monarchy for over 1,000 years. In this moment, you are not crowned by God. You crown yourself. You are not inheriting a throne. You are manufacturing one from the raw material of your own achievements. It is, in one sense, the logical conclusion of the revolution's spirit of individual liberty and the rejection of divine right. Yet paradoxically, it culminates in the re-establishment of an imperial monarchy, with you at its absolute apex. This spectacle teaches a crucial lesson. Symbols matter immensely, and controlling the rituals of power is as vital as commanding armies. By taking the crown yourself, you didn't just negate the Pope's authority, you redefined the source of sovereignty in France. Your legitimacy is not gifted, it is claimed. Yet this act is fraught with a subtle, perhaps even tragic irony. While intended as a display of supreme confidence and independence, could it also reveal a deep-seated insecurity? Are you so acutely aware that your power rests solely on your own shoulders, on the precarious foundation of popular will and military success, that you cannot even risk the symbolic gesture of receiving it from a higher power, however attenuated? Is this self-coronation a grand declaration of invincibility, or a public admission that your authority is not blessed by tradition or divine right, making it inherently vulnerable? The zenith of ambition leads one to believe they are above traditional sources of authority, but perhaps it also isolates them at that height, making the fall potentially more devastating. Ask yourself, was this moment a stroke of unparalleled strategic genius, cementing your image as the self-made emperor, the man of destiny who bent tradition to his will? Or was it an early sign of the hubris that would eventually lead to your undoing? The belief that your personal will was sufficient to uphold an empire, that you needed no sanction beyond your own. What would you have felt standing in that cathedral, witnessing this man, the Corsican outsider, declaring himself emperor, taking the ultimate symbol of power not from the representative of God, but from his own hands? It is a moment etched in history, a testament to the lengths ambition will go, and a stark reminder that the highest peak of self-creation can be the loneliest, most exposed place of all. December 2nd, 1805. The air bites cold on the plains of Austerlitz, in what is now the Czech Republic. You stand against the combined might of two emperors, Austria and Russia, their armies spread across the frozen ground, outnumbering yours. This day is the one-year anniversary of your coronation, a date freighted with immense expectation. Ahead lies a gamble based on pure psychological warfare and strategic deception. You have deliberately weakened your right flank, presenting a tempting target, praying the Allies will fall for the bait and shift their weight, exposing their center. It is a breathtaking risk, built on the absolute conviction that you can predict their movements and break their lines when the moment comes. As dawn struggles through the heavy mist, visibility is minimal. The Allied forces, seeing the apparent weakness on your right, take the bait, committing their reserves and commanders to what they believe will be the decisive flanking maneuver. They march right into the trap you laid. Then, as if on cue from destiny itself, the mist begins to lift, pierced by the rising sun. The rays break through, bathing the battlefield in a golden light. The legendary Sun of Austerlitz. It is not just a meteorological event. It is a symbol of perfect clarity descending upon the chaos, revealing the enemy's fatal error and illuminating your path to victory. You unleash the Grande Armée's iron fist. Marshal Soult's corps drives directly into the now weakened Allied center on the Pratzen Heights, shattering their lines. The battle becomes a rout, a massacre. The emperors themselves flee. This is arguably your greatest battlefield triumph, a flawless execution of strategic planning and tactical brilliance. It demonstrates to the world the terrifying effectiveness of a military machine honed to perfection under your command. This victory at Austerlitz is the zenith of your military prowess, a moment where supreme confidence intersects perfectly with unparalleled competence to achieve the seemingly impossible. It proves your genius is not mere luck, but a fearsome, calculating force. Yet, contained within this overwhelming success is a dangerous seed. This perfect day, the Sun of Austerlitz, plants deep within you the belief in your own infallibility. It teaches the wrong lesson, that your methods are unbreakable, that destiny is on your side. This conviction, born from your greatest triumph, will fuel future costlier gambles, setting the stage for disasters based on the assumption of invincibility. Ask yourself, was this moment the peak of your strategic genius, or the very instant the seeds of your eventual downfall were sown? Defeated at sea, your grand maritime invasion fleet shattered by Nelson at Trafalgar, you pivot. The sword cannot reach the island, so you forge an economic chain. You conceive the continental system, not a military campaign, but a siege waged with tariffs and decrees, designed to strangle the lifeblood from Britain's economy, its trade. You declare war on commerce itself, forbidding any nation under your sway, or wishing to trade with your empire. From importing British goods or trading with Britain. This isn't just policy. It's an attempt to bend the very fabric of economic reality to your will. Europe, a vast tapestry woven with threads of exchange across borders and oceans, must now unravel its connection to the world's leading industrial and trading power. It is a breathtakingly ambitious, perhaps even arrogant act of top-down control. But economies, like rivers, resist being completely dammed. Demand for British goods, from textiles to colonial produce, persists. Smuggling becomes a booming industry, a silent, decentralized rebellion happening on every coast and border. To enforce your grand design, you must stretch your power ever thinner. Nations hesitate, secretly trading or looking the other way. To prevent this leakage, you resort to annexations, absorbing the Dutch coast, for instance, because they weren't policing the blockade effectively enough. When Portugal refuses to comply, you invade. This leads you deeper into the Iberian Peninsula, eventually dragging you into the intractable guerrilla warfare of Spain, a wound that will bleed your empire dry for years. This policy, born of strategic frustration, becomes a constant drain, creating enemies, even among nominal allies, forced to sacrifice their own economies for your geopolitical vendetta. It teaches a hard lesson, that human nature, driven by livelihood and desire, finds ways around inflexible decrees. That complex systems like global trade cannot be simply switched off by fiat. Your belief that you could command commerce as you commanded armies reveals a growing hubris, a disconnect from the messy, unpredictable reality of human affairs beyond the battlefield. You sought to control Europe by controlling its money, but you only fostered resentment and sowed the seeds of resistance. Ask yourself, was this a necessary, innovative strategy, or an overreach born of desperation, fighting a war against forces you couldn't truly comprehend? You look south, towards the Iberian Peninsula. The map seems so simple. Portugal is aligned with Britain, a thorn in your side. Spain, though an ally, is weak, unstable, ruled by Bourbons, a dynasty you've replaced elsewhere. A simple stroke of the pen, a few strategically placed troops. You decide to install your brother, Joseph, on the Spanish throne. A unified, stable Iberia under your family's banner. It seems logical, an easy extension of your power across the Pyrenees. You anticipate a swift transition, perhaps a few murmurs of dissent, easily quelled by the presence of your Grande Armée. After all, you are Napoleon. You move pieces on the grand chessboard of Europe, and they obey your will. But Spain is not a piece on a chessboard. It is a land steeped in ancient loyalties, fervent faith, and a fierce, stubborn sense of identity. You underestimate this, profoundly. What you expect to be a coronation and a peaceful transfer of power ignites a conflagration unlike any you have faced. The Spanish people do not welcome your brother. They rise up, not as conventional armies you can meet on a field and crush with superior tactics and firepower. No, they rise as everyone. Peasants, priests, townspeople. They form decentralized bands, striking from the shadows, melting back into the mountains and valleys. They wage a guerra de guerrillas, a little war. This little war becomes a brutal, agonizing reality. Your soldiers, used to decisive battles and grand maneuvers, find themselves hunted, ambushed, constantly harassed. Supply lines are attacked. Garrisons are besieged by angry villagers, not professional soldiers. The Spanish fight with a ferocity born of faith and a burning desire for independence, a concept your strategic mind, focused on empires and treaties, fails to fully grasp in this context. You thought you were bringing order, modernity. They see you as an invader, a usurper of their king and their god. Year after year, the war grinds on. Spain becomes a voracious maw, swallowing your veteran troops, your best officers, your resources. The desertions are high, the morale low. It's a conflict without glorious victories, only attritional, exhausting skirmishes and brutal reprisals that only harden Spanish resolve. You pour hundreds of thousands of men into this ulcer, a festering wound that bleeds your empire white, while campaigns rage in other theaters. And the British? They seize the opportunity. Under the shrewd command of Arthur Wellesley, later known as the Duke of Wellington, they gain a foothold in Portugal and begin to push into Spain. Their disciplined forces, supported by the implacable Spanish resistance, become a constant, growing threat on your western flank. This was supposed to be a simple annexation, a strategic move. Instead, it ties down vital manpower, drains your treasury, and exposes a critical vulnerability. This Spanish quagmire reveals a fundamental blind spot in your genius. You are a master of conventional warfare, a genius at organizing armies and states. But you misread the power of national identity, of a people united not by a king you placed, but by a shared history, culture, and faith. You learn to conquer territory, but you fail to understand how to win hearts and minds, or how impossible it is to subdue a nation determined to fight for its very soul, even without standing armies. The irony is stark. The emperor who redrew the map of Europe was ultimately worn down by a little war fought by ordinary people, a testament to the unpredictable, indomitable force of popular will when underestimated. Ask yourself, was this purely a strategic miscalculation, or a deeper failure to comprehend the intangible forces that truly move people? What would you have done, standing in his boots, as your grand army bled away in 1,000 small skirmishes? You look upon the woman who stood beside you through the ascent, through the desert sand, through the glorious marches into captured capitals. Josephine, beloved, yes, but barren. The weight of your empire demands more than affection. It demands an heir, a dynastic future to outlast your breath. And so, you make the cold calculus. The empress is set aside. The old guard murmurs. The people who adored the romantic consort are saddened, even angered. But you see further, or so you believe. You cast your gaze towards Vienna, towards the ancient gilded cage of the Habsburgs. Your target, Marie-Louise, Archduchess of Austria, daughter of Emperor Francis I, and, with a twist of history's cruel knife, the grandniece of Marie Antoinette. The queen whose head rolled, signaling the very end of the era your power was forged from opposing. This union is meant to be more than a marriage. It is a strategic alliance, a bold declaration that you are not merely a transient revolutionary force, but a ruler, accepted, even embraced, by Europe's oldest royal houses. You seek not just a cradle for your son, but a cloak of legitimacy woven from centuries of royal blood. And it works in a superficial sense. The marriage is a spectacle of grandeur, a blend of Austrian tradition and imperial French power. Soon, a son arrives, Napoleon II, proclaimed the King of Rome. Your dynasty seems secure. nested within the venerable lines of Europe. You see this as the final piece of armor, proof that the Corsican upstart has transcended his origins and become one with the established order. But this act, born of ambition and a yearning for validation from the very system you dismantled, holds a deep, tragic irony. The revolutionaries, the citizens who saw you as their champion against monarchy, are alienated. They see not legitimacy, but betrayal. You trade the fierce, unshakable foundation of popular revolutionary support for the fragile, shimmering veneer of dynastic acceptance. The Habsburgs are now family, yes, but family with long memories of your conquests, your humiliation of their empire. This marriage, intended to bring stability and acceptance, highlights the fundamental contradiction at your core. The revolutionary emperor, seeking monarchical roots. Ask yourself, did you truly believe you could reconcile these two worlds? That the kings of old would ever truly see you as one of their own? Or merely a useful, temporary inconvenience? This pursuit of old-world legitimacy was not strength, but a revealing vulnerability, a chink in the armor of the self-made man. June 1812. You stand before the largest army Europe has ever assembled. Over 600,000 men, a kaleidoscope of nationalities, French veterans, Italian conscripts, German allies, Polish cavalry eager for their homeland's return. They stretch as far as the eye can see, a living, breathing manifestation of your continental dominance. Your target, Russia, the vast, enigmatic empire whose Tsar, Alexander I, has dared to undermine your continental system. The economic weapon meant to strangle Britain. You feel an absolute certainty, a conviction forged in a dozen victories, that this immense force, guided by your will, will secure a swift, decisive triumph. Your marshals, seasoned by years of war, voice concerns in hushed tones. The sheer scale of the undertaking, the unimaginable distances, the logistical nightmare of feeding and supplying 500,000 men and countless horses deep within Russia's interior. But their doubts are like pebbles against the rising tide of your resolve. Your ambition is boundless, your belief in your destiny unshakable. You see only the prize, a compliant Tsar, a closed continent, Britain brought to its knees. You give the order. The Grand Army crosses the Niemen River, a dark, wide expanse that feels like a threshold into another world. The initial advance is breathtaking, a river of humanity and steel flowing eastward. Villages are swallowed and spat out. Forests part before this human tide. But quickly, the problems your marshals foresaw begin to gnaw at the edges of this grandeur. Supply wagons break down or cannot keep pace. Foraging parties find little in the increasingly sparse countryside. And the Russians, they do not stand and fight. Instead, they retreat. They fall back into the immensity of their land, burning their own villages, destroying crops, leaving behind only scorched earth and empty air. They are like phantoms, always visible, but never quite within reach for the decisive battle you crave. This is not the war you expected. This is not Austerlitz or Jena, where you could maneuver, trap, and annihilate. This is a war against distance, against emptiness, against a strategy of evasion that leverages the very scale of Russia against you. Here lies the ultimate expression of your hubris. You believed your strategic genius, your iron will, could overcome geography, climate, and the fundamental refusal of a nation to yield on its own terms. You thought you could impose your will upon the physical world as easily as you imposed it upon a defeated foe on the battlefield. But strategy, you are learning, must ultimately respect reality. Ambition, no matter how limitless, crashes against the wall of physical constraints. Starving soldiers, dying horses, supply lines stretched to the breaking point across hundreds, then thousands of miles. The profound, devastating insight is this: scaling one's ambition infinitely without a proportional, realistic increase in resources, logistical planning, and a sober assessment of the environment is not just risky, it is a recipe for absolute disaster. You had built the biggest machine, but you hadn't accounted for the fuel and maintenance required to run it across an entire continent, against an enemy who refused to play by the rules you had mastered. You lead the grand army deeper into the abyss, still clinging to the certainty that destiny is on your side. This is the fatal overconfidence born of repeated, extraordinary successes, the gamble from which your empire and your legend will never fully recover. You are marching into a trap of your own making, guided by the very force, your ambition, that had previously elevated you to unimaginable heights. Ask yourself, is there a point where ambition stops being a strength and becomes a blinding weakness? What physical, unyielding realities exist in your own challenges that no amount of willpower can simply overcome? You pushed forward, certain that Russia would break. It was you who were about to break against Russia's immense, indifferent patience. September 7th, 1812. The sun rises over a landscape bristling with steel and anticipation. Outside Moscow, you have finally pinned down Kutuzov's main army, forced them to make their stand on the fields near a village called Borodino. The moment you craved, the decisive battle that would break Russia's will and open the road to a triumphant peace, is at hand. But what unfolds is not a grand maneuver or a swift conquest, but a brutal, grinding horror. Borodino is a slaughterhouse. For 12 hours, cannon pound, muskets crackle, and men surge back and forth across earthworks and ravines. It is less a battle of tactics and more a test of sheer, bloody endurance. Cavalry charges slam into infantry squares like waves against rocks. Artillery tears gaping holes in packed ranks, and the ground becomes slick with blood and mud. You commit your reserves, then your guards, a rare, costly decision. The casualties are staggering on both sides. Perhaps 70,000 to 80,000 dead, wounded, or missing by nightfall. It is arguably the single bloodiest day of warfare in the entire Napoleonic era. You hold the field. Kutuzov retreats. Technically, it is a victory. But standing amidst the carnage, the cost is written not in captured standards, but in the silent, broken bodies covering the landscape. The Russian army is battered, yes, but it is not destroyed. Its core remains intact, withdrawing into the vastness of the Russian interior, preserving its strength to fight another day. This is the first bitter taste of a Pyrrhic victory on an unimaginable scale, a win that feels indistinguishable from defeat due to the immense price paid and the failure to achieve the decisive outcome. Ask yourself, was the ego's demand for battle worth this ocean of blood? When the core objective remained frustratingly out of reach, a week later, you enter Moscow, the ancient heart of Russia, expecting the boyars to come bearing the keys to the city, ready to sue for peace. Instead, you march into an eerie silence. The city is largely abandoned, stripped bare of its population. Within hours, fires begin to erupt, deliberately set on orders from Governor Rostopchin, or perhaps spontaneously ignited by the chaos and vengeful despair of the few remaining citizens and retreating soldiers. The fires spread, fueled by the city's wooden structures, becoming a raging inferno that consumes palaces, churches, and barracks alike. You are forced to retreat from the Kremlin itself as flames lick at its walls. Moscow becomes a vast, smoldering ruin. You occupy the ashes, the emperor of nothing but rubble and charred timbers. Supplies, already stretched thin by the long march, dwindle rapidly in the devastated city. Winter, the true general of Russia, looms with a chilling certainty. This desolate scene is a stark, unforgettable lesson. Conquering a capital means little if the enemy's spirit, their national will to resist annihilation, remains unbroken. The burning of Moscow is an act of defiance so profound, so self-destructive, that it reveals the limits of military power against a people who refuse to submit. You stand amidst the ruins, the acrid smell of smoke filling the cold air, the chilling realization settling in. You have marched your magnificent army, the Grande Armée, to the ends of the earth, endured the horror of Borodino, only to capture an empty, burning shell. Trapped by your own relentless advance, deep in hostile territory as the Russian winter descends, the grand strategic prize you sought has turned to dust and ash in your hands. This was not the glorious culmination of a triumphant campaign, but a descent into a strategic nightmare of your own making. The ambition that carried you to the gates of Moscow has now cornered you within its ruins. The cold grasp of winter isn't quite here, but the air in Saxony bites deep, carrying the scent of inevitable conflict. It is October 1813. The ghosts of Moscow still linger, a chilling reminder of an empire stretched too thin, a gamble that cost you 500,000 men. You retreated, licking wounds, scrambling every resource France could spare. New armies were raised, boys with muskets they barely knew how to hold. Veterans scraped from garrisons across the collapsing periphery of your power. You fought valiantly in the spring and summer, winning tactical victories, but the strategic tide had turned. Now, you are pushed back, cornered in Germany, the very heart of your continental system beginning to palpate with rebellious life. The armies of Europe converge. Not just Russia, licking its lips after your disastrous retreat. Not just Prussia, humbled but defiant. Now Austria, your father-in-law's empire, throws its weight against you, a bitter betrayal of blood and alliance. And Sweden, under the command of your own former marshal, Bernadotte, joins the chorus of your enemies. At Leipzig, they gather, a monstrous multinational host. It's not just a battle, it is the Völkerschlacht, the battle of nations. You stand before an enemy force outnumbering yours by nearly 2-1, perhaps more, a sheer weight of human mass and cannon that the world has rarely seen assembled in one place. You survey your lines. There are faces you know, men who marched with you to glory at Austerlitz, Jena, Wagram. But there are also so many young, frightened eyes, conscripts rushed through training, thrust onto the anvil of Europe's fury. They fight with courage, perhaps fueled by desperation or sheer French élan, but they lack the hardened experience, the ruthless efficiency of the old guard, depleted by campaigns past. The fighting is brutal, a maelstrom of cannon fire, cavalry charges, and bayonet thrusts across sodden fields. Your tactical genius still flickers, orchestrating desperate counterattacks, exploiting temporary weaknesses. You repel assaults, hold key positions, inflicting terrible casualties on the enemy. For a few agonizing days, you defy the odds, making them pay in blood for every inch. But the numbers are inexorable. Like a dam cracking under impossible pressure, your lines begin to fracture. The Saxons, ostensibly your allies, turn their coats in the heat of battle, firing on your unsuspecting troops, a dagger in the back from those you thought were bound to your cause. It is a moment of bitter, cutting irony. Your continental system was built on forced alliances, and now those coerced loyalties snap under the strain of this decisive moment. The German states, long chafing under your dominion, sensing your vulnerability, openly declare against you. It's not just a military defeat. It's the political structure of your empire crumbling in real time. You are forced to order the retreat, a desperate gamble to save what remains of your army. The chaos is immense. A key bridge is blown too early, trapping thousands of your soldiers on the wrong bank, leaving them to be captured or drowned. The vision of a controlled withdrawal collapses into a rout for many. The empire in Central Europe, built through years of conquest, reorganization, and imposition of your will, dissolves like mist in the morning sun. The Confederation of the Rhine evaporates. Your grip loosens, then vanishes entirely. This isn't just a loss, it's a reckoning. Here, at Leipzig, your military brilliance, though still capable of inflicting immense pain on your enemies, is finally and irrevocably overcome by the sheer, unyielding force of a continent united against you. The insight is brutal and simple. Even the most exceptional individual, the most brilliant mind, cannot perpetually defy the gravitational pull of overwhelming numbers, overwhelming resources, and overwhelming resentment when isolated. Your ambition, boundless and unchecked, had created its own counterforce, a coalition determined not just to defeat you, but to restore a balance you had so violently disrupted. You were no longer the magnificent eagle soaring over Europe, but the cornered lion, bleeding, facing a united front that your own relentless expansion had forged. You retreat back to France, smaller, weaker, pursued, no longer the conqueror, but a sovereign fighting for his very throne, for the survival of the nation he embodied. Ask yourself, when facing impossible odds, is continued resistance courage or simply the refusal to accept the inevitable, prolonging the suffering for everyone involved? What would you have done, standing in his boots, watching the tide turn irrevocably against you on that muddy German plain? You spend your final years on the remote, wind-swept island of St. Helena, a prisoner of the British. The grandeur is gone, replaced by the gnawing monotony of enforced idleness and the constant biting wind. You, who once commanded armies that shook continents, now command little more than a few servants and the guard detail that ensures your cage remains secure. Cut off from the world you once dominated, the boundless energy that fueled conquest must find a new outlet. And it does. Here, on this unyielding rock, you dedicate yourself not to war, but to shaping your own history. The pen becomes your final weapon. You dictate memoirs, crafting your legend piece by carefully chosen piece. You portray yourself as a revolutionary martyr, a modernizer undone not by your own errors, but by fate, by betrayal, and by the old, stagnant European powers who could not comprehend your vision. You revisit the campaigns, the laws, the grand unfinished tapestry of your European empire, attempting to control the narrative even in utter defeat. The ambition that drove you to conquer nations now drives you to conquer memory, to ensure that the emperor in chains transcends his prison and lives on in the minds of men. This final act reveals the enduring human desire to control one's legacy, the deep-seated need to influence how history remembers you, even when you can no longer influence the present. Exile provides a unique, albeit intensely bitter perspective. It allows for profound reflection, though perhaps not always objective self-criticism. The insight forged on Saint Helena is that the most crucial battle for historical perception is fought long after the cannons fall silent, in the quiet study with a pen and paper, even in utter defeat, stripped of power and freedom. The sheer will to influence the future, to shape the judgment of posterity, can persist with astonishing force. You, who bent kings and nations to your will, now wrestle with the unyielding rock of your final prison and the relentless judgment of history. A timeless struggle for anyone who has wielded great power and lost it. The grand ambition that began on a small island ends on another, forcing a final, profound reflection on what truly endures. Perhaps not empire and conquest, but the ideas unleashed, and, more tragically, the immense human cost left in their wake. What enduring lesson does your epic journey from Corsican outsider to emperor and exile hold for us, the inheritors of a world still shaped by your ghost? Perhaps it's this: the line between boundless ambition and destructive hubris is perilously thin, often invisible until it is crossed. The drive to achieve, to lead, to build is a powerful, necessary force in the human story. But when it detaches itself from reality, from empathy, from the acknowledgement of limits, whether the limits of human endurance, the power of natural forces, or the collective will of others, it ceases to be creative and becomes purely, terribly destructive. Your life asks us, where do our ambitions lead? Do we build or merely consume resources, both human and material? In our relentless push forward, do we inspire loyalty through shared purpose, or merely demand obedience through fear and power? What is the true cost of our relentless push forward? What if the ambition that drove you, unchecked, rose again, cloaked in modern forms, seeking to bend the world to its will, heedless of the frozen rivers or the burning cities it leaves behind? As you yourself might reflect, perhaps with a final, bitter understanding forged in isolation, from triumph to disaster was but a step. I have seen that step taken, and history watches, waiting to see if we learn from the steps you took.